Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Hope to see everyone join us today for a good discussion seeking wisdom. Today, we'll be seeking wisdom on the topic of keeping the tension, and it's an interesting topic. And the interesting thing about the topic is that it is referring to the balance. Keeping tension is about balance. We'll dig into that a little more, and we will learn learn a lesson from a bicycle rim. And so, as always, I like to introduce the concept of wisdom each episode, just to remind people how we view what wisdom is. And wisdom is a journey. It's a process that we go through. It's a process that starts with gaining knowledge, and we can gain knowledge in a lot of different ways, formally, informally, hopefully gain something new every day. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that stop with knowledge thinking that that's power. Reality is, it is not. Our power comes at a later part of the process. But the second step in this journey or process is to gain understanding. And understanding means that it becomes a part of us. It's internalized, and that we are beginning to apply the knowledge we've gained in such a way that it makes it practical, usable, and helpful, hopefully positive. And then the last step in this process is to go to wisdom. And it's the most important step in this process. And one of the key elements of gaining wisdom is to begin to see things outside of ourselves, not just how things affect us, not just how things affect us in the immediate, but how things have an effect not just immediate, but long term, and the effects that it has on other people as well, the people in our lives, our family, our friends, our colleagues. And so, just that next step from knowledge to understanding, and then lastly to wisdom, is so key. And, excuse me, we want to make that step and make that purposeful. And for those of us that have a spiritual bent, we like to kind of look at it as if we're seeing things through God's eyes. We want God's perspective as we walk and learn and live and make choices. So that's about the wisdom journey that we have and we're on. And so thank you for being here. And we'll talk a bit about keeping the tension. And I want to welcome Sherry and Rick and Lydia and Eunice and Nada. Glad to have you guys today, and look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions as we move along and talk further about keeping the tension. And again, keeping the tension is about the true perspective on balance. So I'll offer a little background where I come from with this. Part of it starts with a book, a small book that I read, over 40 years ago. And this book was written by an author named John Stott. And this book was called Balanced Christianity. And one of the things he talks about and clarifies is that balance is not about finding middle ground or half and half, or however you want to look at it in that sense. Balance is about keeping tension with two opposing characteristics. And the example I always like to use when I share this concept is that we are very clearly supposed to love one another, which is very important. And at the same time, we're supposed to speak truth to one another. And sometimes those seem to be in opposing positions to each other, because sometimes when we speak the truth, it seems that it's not very shall we say, easy or nice. And therefore, we tend to want to think that it's not compassionate. But the reality is that when we keep balance between love and truth, speaking truth, then we are in a proper place. And depending on where we are in life and who we are working with, how we speak that truth, as long as it's done in love, it becomes important. And if we move back and forth between one extreme of love, which includes compassion and understanding, or speaking truth, which means telling people what needs to be said, and it may not always be pleasant, then we are able to move back and forth between them. And I think we all know that at different times as we go along, that that we need to be able to show great compassion. We need to be able to reach out and even give a hug, an understanding word, a shoulder to cry on, whatever term you like to use. But then there are other times that we need to tell people they've messed up, what they're about to do is not a good idea, and speak very truthfully to them. And so holding those two in tension become important. The other concept, and I have a diagram or a graphic about this, I believe on my profile. If not, I'll put it up there. But life isn't a straight line. We don't go from beginning to end in a straight line. Actually, life moves around all over the place. And so finding middle ground in what I consider a moving target is kind of tough. And I think it frustrates people a lot because it's not easy to find middle ground or equal half and half when where the middle is in a constant state of flow. Welcome, Jeremy. Glad to have you with us today. So again, this concept of tension or balance becomes very important, because where we rest or position ourselves in relation to various characteristics will vary depending on where we are in our life journey and where others are in their life journey. Remember, part of being wise is we look at our own situation and get understanding and insight in making choices based on what's going on with us. But part of that wisdom is also seeing how it affects others and considering that as we begin to make choices along the way. And having the balance or tension in our life becomes very critical. Depends on where things are. And so I have for many years tried to help people reconsider when they start looking for balance, what that looks like. And so what we find out is that we need to have understanding of these various characteristics, of course, and flexibility versus being steadfast, a couple of other characteristics. And what at the end of the day, when we are walking through life, again, since we're not in a straight line, what that looks like is, and how we hold those characteristics in tension, in my mind, another graphic, and I shared this on the event, looks more like a bicycle rim. And some of you may go, what does a bicycle rim have to do with keeping proper tension and keeping things in a strong place and in a smooth direction as much as possible? Well, for those that don't know, the interesting thing about bicycle rims is that the spokes on a bicycle rim are not pushing outward to hold the outer part of the rim in place. The spokes are actually pulling tension from the middle, the hub of the wheel, to the outside. And if you learn the way that you keep the wheel, the rim, strong and balanced and straight is by the proper tension on each of those spokes. There's actually an adjustment on them so that you can increase or decrease the tension. And what happens with that is when we have the proper amount of tension, the outer rim is supported the greatest and strongest and keeps in the middle, keeps spinning in a good circle as we go down the road. Second thing is we have to have balance between the opposing spokes, because if you don't, the wheel will become either warped or out of line. And therefore, when you ride on it, it will not ride well. It will not ride straight and so on. So a bicycle rim is a good example of tension in our lives. Finding that right amount of pressure between the two extremes and keeping them pulled against each other to make sure that we are in line with what we need to be. So that's why I use a bicycle rim as an example. For those of you that are not so mechanically oriented or really concerned about it, that's why I offer the explanation. This is something I learned along the way in my journey, because when I was a kid, one of the things I did was work on my own bicycle, and I had to learn about how that worked and how to do those. So the other element that I like to consider in all of this is one of the most famous balances that theoretically we should be keeping, and that is work-life balance. And after a lot of consideration and really thinking this through, in my opinion, there is no such thing as work-life balance. And I think the fact that we are trying to find work-life balance indicates that we have misalignment of priorities. And let me explain a little bit more about that. Work-life balance implies that life and work are two opposing forces in our life, and they aren't. At the end of the day, what we are about, because we're born and live without working when we get started. And generally speaking, when we finish up our life, we're not actively engaged in working. We are living, and work just happens to be a part of living. And if work becomes life to us, then there's a whole different problem in that it has become too important, and that throws our priorities out. At the end of the day, we're designed to live, and to live purposefully. And the way I like to put it is we find our design, passion, and purpose. And when we start living in accordance with that, that includes gaining our vision and our mission and our values, and setting that up to determine our priorities in life. And at times, work will take priority over some things. In other words, the balance out there between work and other choices, because that work is not an opposition to life. It's work is an opposition to a number of things. And by keeping that in the right perspective and understanding that depending on seasons in our life, circumstances, work may have to take some priority over other things that are held in tension with it. And we have to make choices accordingly. So work-life balance, again, is assuming that work should be a central priority. It's a factor, it's part of life, but it is not the part of life. Life is what we do because of who we are. And so we really need to rethink that a bit. And what my business partner and I began to talk about and learn from each other, talking about Anton, for those that don't know, who we do a podcast on Tuesday mornings, but we came up with a different perspective. And that is that we need congruence in our life, which includes work. And it needs to be congruent with who we are and what we're about and what our purpose is and our design. And when we start making that a priority and keeping that priority as foremost, then we begin to understand about living life the way we're supposed to, living life in a more abundant fashion. So that's kind of the concepts that I'm working from this morning. And I think we do well to reevaluate some of the ways we express it. At the end of the day, the words we use are not as critical as having an understanding between us and others about the words we use so we communicate effectively. Jeremy makes a comment. Says work-life balance and life balance when aligned makes our journey easier, especially when we seek the assistance as needed. That is a true statement, Jeremy. It does. When we keep our priorities straight, that's what it's about, is getting our priorities and having congruence there. Welcome, Dr. Vimla. Glad to have you this morning. So again, I don't like the term work-life balance because it makes us think that we've got to find half of the time for work and half the time for life, and it shouldn't work that way. In fact, when we choose our work and we move forward with that, it should be a congruent part of our life. I think part of the problem that we have is so many people are not working congruent with who they are. And that creates the struggle. That's why it's so hard, and maybe even the felt need to have work-life balance, because since work is not a congruent part of our life, there's a struggle there, because we're always going, well, how do I keep working, making money, earning a living, whatever term you want to call it, and still have a life? Well, the key there is congruence rather than balance. The key there is that our work is a byproduct of who we are and how we are supposed to live to start with. It doesn't become this defining part of our entire life. Yes, I understand that we spend hours, quite a few hours, doing work in our life. In fact, the average number is about 80,000 hours. But if you look, we live on average probably about 150,000 hours. Just again, average numbers. And so we just need to consider that balance is not finding middle ground. And part of what I like to say or compare this to is, if we think balance is finding the middle between one opposing force and another, we're really kind of like walking down the middle of the road. And I appreciate that sometimes that's the right spot, but most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's not equally split half and half with whatever's going on. And I think the sooner we can begin to gain some wisdom about this and look at our choices with work and other areas in light of our life and walking in the purpose and design that we have, then the more likely we're going to live fulfilled or abundant. I like the term abundant because I believe that, no, I don't just believe it, I know it's so, that we're designed to live in an abundant fashion. And some people want to say, oh, you mean everybody have money? No, not necessarily. Could be money, but that's only a small part of it. This abundance that I speak of is that we live fulfilled. We live how we're intended to live, and therefore we're very satisfied, very fulfilled, and we learn how to be contented. We learn how to be joyful, and we learn how to deal with life circumstances. In fact, I would offer, if we're trying to take middle ground all the time and be split half and half with different characteristics that we must have, then when adversity comes along, that upsets that whole concept. Versus if we are walking in tension and what I consider real balance, when adversity comes along, we're prepared to adjust. We're prepared to flex with it so that it doesn't become such an ordeal. Yes, sometimes we encounter adversities that are going to be hard and challenging, but if we're keeping in balance by keeping tension, we can respond much better. I think, to me, we talk in life about it's so important today to be agile. Well, I appreciate the concept and I agree, because a lot of changes going on and a lot of things happening that we can't always predict. But to me, the best way to stay agile is keeping proper tension in our life at the end of the day. Let's see. Sherry offers, agreed, work-life balance terms give permission to separate the two into individual buckets when alignment of the two is more important. Yes, well put, Sherry. Thank you. Our work should not be in opposition to our life. If it is, then there's a problem. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that it is in opposition to their life because their work was more determined by some theoretical data, or quite often pushed on us in our education system and our culture as to what is so-called success. And as a result, we end up working in a place, in a way that is not congruent with who we are. And that creates a lot of stress and struggle and challenges in our life that don't have to be there, shouldn't be there, weren't designed to be there. So again, keeping tension, look at congruence in our life, I think is a shift in our mindset and our behaviors so that we have a chance of living abundantly, so that we can live life in a way that is fulfilling and is not so over indexed on stress all the time. One of the things Anton and I deal with on the podcast on Tuesday mornings is to deal proper ways to manage stress. And please understand, I'm not talking about eliminating stress. Stress is part of what we're designed to be about. And one of those things that causes those stressors that are healthy is the adversity we deal with. And we're told we will deal with adversity. That's part of it. And unfortunately, there are those that try to avoid adversity at all costs and spend a lot of energy avoiding it, when better spent to be able to prepare and use the energy to go through it and overcome it. Let's see. Jeremy makes a comment. When we're passionate about our work, we align our balance between work and life. Yes, part of what we are, I go back to, we all like to have our phrases and our little catchy ways. But for me, I like to look at it as we are supposed to live according to our design and our passion and our purpose. And when we are living congruent with that in our life, our passion lines up with what we do, and what we do lines up with our passion, and therefore it takes on a different meaning. And work doesn't become such a problem because it's congruent. It's part of who we are rather than something we have to do in order to live. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble. We've got a lot of people making money, making a living, as we call it, and rather than living their life and allowing earning income as part of what we do, to be a subset, to be a part, to fall in line with our vision, mission, and values in our life. Good comment, Sherry. I like that one. Avoiding adversity creates adversity in itself. Indeed, when the more we struggle against the adversities that come along, or even the concept of having adversity, the greater the adversity we have, because we're fighting against what is meant to be. And think about that. If we have, I don't know, I'm going to pull something out of my head and I hope it works. But if we're trying to get around or over a mountain, a big rock, and one option to overcome that rock in our life and that mountain, to get beyond it, we can start banging our head or chipping away at the rock in the hopes of finding a hole somewhere where we can get through it, rather than doing that, which we know is going to create other problems, frustrations, tired, and other issues, injury. Rather than fighting and trying to go through it and making it hard that way, we accept the fact that the mountain is there, but that we need to overcome the mountain somehow. And once we do that, we can begin to look at alternate ways to overcome that adversity. But it has to start by saying, there's a mountain there. It's real. And my challenge becomes, how do I overcome it? Because it's in my path, keeping me from my destination, or keeping me from my vision, passion, purpose, and those pieces. Dr. Vimla makes a comment here. Says, agreed, we should try our best to overcome any adversity in our lives. Our focus, yes, is to overcome, not to ignore or avoid. That's where I think we get, in fact, I can tell you that a lot of our cultures are going out of their way to avoid adversity. We have put bubbles, figuratively put bubbles around our children so that they don't skin their knee, or they don't experience sickness, or however we want to look at it. We are trying so hard to avoid these things, when the reality is we should accept that that's a part of life and look at ways that we can overcome it. Let that be our focus, is in overcoming rather than resisting its right to even be there. And so we really have to change our focus and our mindset in the process. Welcome, Eunice. Glad to have you. And I like that one, Eunice, that we don't develop courage by being happy every day. That's true. In fact, there's those that study social behavior, social trends and things, talk about how that when we go without having adversity, when things are too easy, we become weak. And then once we become weak, then we experience more adversity, more problems, which helps to make us strong again. At the end of the day, the key takeaway is, quit resisting adversity. Doesn't mean we should go looking for trouble. Doesn't mean that at all. In fact, I offer that sometimes we have self-induced adversity because we lack the wisdom to know how to make choices that keep those from happening. And so when we can, by wisdom, deal with adversity and issues and challenges that maybe we don't have to, then the ones that we are forced to become less of an issue. They become more manageable in our life. So again, part of congruence and tension in our life, balance as tension in our life, it allows us to be able to react to adversity in a healthier fashion. because we're not trying to constantly keep this magic middle that is supposed to be the way to do it. We are able to adjust and be agile because of this tension. We have the option to be able to adjust and adapt as things come along. And let's see here. Eunice goes on to say, all the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles have strengthened me. You may not realize it when it happens, but a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you. Oh, that's a Walt Disney quote. Okay. Well, Walt had some interesting insights and perspectives, and that is one of them. And I'll even put it in terms of the Bible, because anybody that has been around the Wisdom Seeker live podcast knows that's a source for me for a lot of wisdom. The Bible says, when to quote it, is count it all joy, brethren, when we encounter various trials or when we have adversity. It says to count it joy. And that's not what we do as a culture. When we face adversity, first we try to argue we shouldn't have to face the adversity. And if we had been smarter, we wouldn't have adversity in our life. And that's not true. And the other is, well, I'm going to try to avoid every bit of adversity because I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. That's not healthy either, because what that verse goes on to say is that we should accept that adversity as a teacher. And that is the truth of it, is that our adversities in our life are there to teach us. And when we approach it in that fashion, going through the adversity may not be easy, but it is less emotionally hard. At that point, with the right attitude, it is spiritually attuned to the right perspective for how we are made, because I have to remind everyone that we are body, soul, and spirit. And in order to be healthy, we've got to have balance in those three areas of our life. We have to take care of those areas. Otherwise, we won't be healthy at that point. Lydia makes a great comment that adversity that's not dealt with will be a repetition, a lesson. It's going to repeat, I think, is what Lydia is saying. And when we do all we can to avoid those lessons, that means next time around we've got more to come. And my experience is that the next time around is more difficult than the last time. And we should therefore look to deal with it head on the first time, because second time, third time, it gets worse. And yes, Lydia, what you say is so true. Through adversity, our faith are challenged. That's a place where it helps us to not only grow mentally, physically, but also spiritually. And it challenges us to grow and deepen in the area of our faith. It's very important. In fact, it just popped into my head. We look at avoiding adversity or challenges and obstacles. Well, the thing that we see in our culture today is a culture that has avoided other kinds of resistance or adversity, and it has to do with our physical well-being. And that resistance and all that we've avoided is the resistance of lifting weights or running or doing exercise, because those are forms of resistance. We're pushing against resistance to get healthy. Welcome, Erica. So glad to see you. Glad to have you. And so by avoiding that adversity, we end up becoming weak. Just like if we avoid exercise in our life, we become physically weak. So again, adversity is an important, valuable part of our lives. And the way we got off on this is that when we learn to hold life in the proper tension and we have congruence, adversity is not such a terrible thing in our life. We began to see the value of working through that adversity, overcoming that adversity rather than resisting it. And let's see, Lydia makes another good comment. Without adversity, we're in stagnation in our faith and growth. Yes, that is correct. And part of the value of that adversity is it helps us to push to the next level in our life. It helps us to develop as a person. One of the values of adversity is that quite often is when we learn of our potential that we didn't understand because we had never been challenged in it, and the adversity caused us to be challenged in it. And Dr. Vimla says we have to treat adversity as teachers, and we have to remember that lessons in the future for a happy life. Yes, the adversity, by the way, is a great teacher of wisdom. And when we, rather than resist the adversity, and it's right to be there, and we go through it well and we learn, that's quite often where we learn and gain our wisdom, because we are challenged. We're pushed beyond our normal. We're pushed beyond sometimes what seems like our limits. And I'll share a pattern that I have noticed over the years is that, most people, wisdom is a byproduct of age. It just takes time and in people's lives. And that's because most of us don't have extreme adversity in our life to cause us to gain wisdom sooner. But I have seen younger people, much younger people at times, that have a great deal of wisdom for their age. And the reason, the common pattern is these younger people have had to deal with more adversity than others of similar age, that they've had to struggle, they've had to work through things. Quite often it can be in the form of health, learning to deal with health challenges, or, and I use this carefully, but so-called physical abnormalities or physical disabilities, things like that, that our culture has caused to be a problem rather than an opportunity. You watch people that are not so-called in the norm and don't have the so-called easy life. Quite often you find they may not have had an easy life, but if they have maintained the right attitude, they grow a great deal in their wisdom. And they are such an advantage to have that it's remarkable. The unfortunate problem is that we have not put a priority or made a value to gain wisdom, and therefore willingness to go through what it takes to gain that wisdom. Let's see, Rick makes a comment, says everyone has some amount of adversity in their life. Be thankful to God in the good times. Yes, the key, and Rick, you hit on it, the key is thankfulness. Go back to the verse that I referred to earlier, and for those of you that like to look these things up and gain them from the Bible, I'm talking about James chapter 1. And when again, he talks about encountering adversity, he says we are supposed to count it all joy. Be happy about it. Be thankful in it. We may not be able to emotionally say, boy, I'm glad this hard time has come along, but we can be thankful, first of all, for the blessings that we still have, even in those hard times, because I don't care who you are. I don't care what's going on, your life circumstance, you've always got something to be grateful for. Just the fact that you're alive. People quite often take that for granted. We don't need to be taking that for granted. Life is not guaranteed, and we cannot assume it to be. So just being grateful to being alive, grateful to be where we are, what's going on. And so the key, as Rick has talked about, is being thankful. And that includes being thankful when things are good, rather than when things are good. Unfortunately, in our culture, we tend to want to say, oh, well, I'm doing things right. Things are good. No, you're blessed. You're fortunate. And in the same fashion, when things are bad, you don't have to say, well, I have messed up. I've done something wrong. No, not necessarily. Again, that's assuming a lot of ability on our part that may or may not be true. Let's see. I want to be sure and get comments. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Erica says that's so true. Peter L. Hammer is wise beyond his years. I think if we are paying attention and we look around, we have examples in our lives of people that have had challenges in their life and have kept the right attitude and gained a great deal of wisdom. One person that I think falls into this category is a guy that has become very famous. His name is Nick. He has no arms and no legs. Well, I got the good fortune of hearing Nick recently at a conference. I even got to meet Nick and chat with him a bit. And the remarkable thing about Nick is that someone that by all appearances could be bitter and angry and upset because life's dealt them a bad hand, Nick's just the opposite. Nick is joyous. Nick has gained wisdom. Nick is living abundantly even without arms and legs. And that's the key, is gaining the wisdom and keeping a grateful attitude. And Nick will tell you, and he did in this conference, that yes, he would hope for a miracle of gaining his legs and arms, no doubt. But at the end of the day, he is grateful that he's alive. He's grateful for the opportunities and the fact that he's been able to get through a lot of adversity and find abundance even in his challenging state. Let's see. I like that. Sherry, I appreciate that comment or phrase, that breakthrough comes in our thank you. Indeed, the sooner we get to the point where we are thankful that we are allowed to go through this adversity, the sooner we will break through and overcome it. And the other beauty of going through this process, and this is something that we miss, is that we have a universal design, and that universal design is about helping each other. We have very unique designs, all of us, no doubt about it. And that is very great and special, but we share some common universal designs by our Creator, and one of them is to help each other. And the value of dealing with and overcoming these adversities in our life is that we not only do we grow and gain wisdom, but it prepares us to help others as we go along. Part of why we encounter people in our lives is for this very purpose of learning and growing ourselves, and then come along and share with others how to overcome, to encourage them during their adversity, because most of us, when we're in the middle of the adversity, the biggest challenge is maintaining hope. And that is such a key thing. Great comments. Let me keep. Lydia says, gratitude birth greater maturity within us. Yes. Just the act of choosing to be grateful in these circumstances and these challenges is of such value in and of itself. Dr. Vimla makes a comment. We have to pay our gratitude to God for everything, blessings and adversity both, because adversity made us strong. Indeed, the key is our thankfulness, our gratitude for our Creator and what we are given, and frankly, who we are blessed to have with us. One of the greatest blessings is that when we go through these adversities, we find out who the people in our life that loves us and cares about us, because they're going to walk through that adversity with us in one way or another. One of the most obvious is through prayer support. That's something that, I don't care who you are, that's something you can do. It doesn't matter where you are versus compared to where things are happening, is prayer. And it's such a valuable component. And once we understand the power in that, then we will recognize the value we can bring even at a distance. Let's see. Yeah. And Rick, that's one of my favorite things to say. We've got to have an attitude of gratitude. And if we do that in all our life along the way, then things change remarkably. And by the way, gratitude is not about an emotion. It's not about, oh, I feel good about it. It's about a choice. It's a decision. Welcome, Ed Mario. Glad to have you with us today. Appreciate that. Yeah, Rick makes a comment. Obviously, you've seen either videos or something. He says, if you think you're having a bad day, go watch Nick. Indeed. Again, I watched Nick in various circumstances during that day, and Nick doesn't, he's obviously in worldly standards, he's handicapped. He has physical disability. But the interesting thing, Nick didn't allow that physical disability to define him. In fact, it's because of his physical disability that he gets to shine. And being grateful and thankful in it makes such a difference. And he talks about that journey. I encourage you to even get the book about his journey as a person, because it is so much a representation of this concept of counting it all joy, brethren, when we encounter various trials or adversities. He is a living example of the principles there and the wisdom in it. Okay, I had not heard this saying, Dr. Vimla. Adversity introduces a man to himself, Albert Einstein. Yes, I think so. Part of the reason that so many of us in our current cultures aren't sure of who we are or what we need to be doing, because we've never been challenged in it. We've not had, we have avoided the adversities. We avoided the pains that come in life, physical, mental, emotional. We think that the best thing we can do is keep anyone from having to go through that. In my opinion, I think it is the worst thing we can do. And in fact, if we truly love people, we recognize their the value of adversities, and rather than encourage them to resist and be unhappy because they're going through it, we encourage them that it's normal, it's part of life. We've all gone through it, and the reason we go through it is to be encouragement and hope to others. We, in fact, at our church yesterday, one of the things that we talked about is maintaining hope in our lives and how that affects everything we do. So let me back up a little bit. I know everybody's going, well, how are we talking about adversity? And the topic for today is about keeping the proper tension. Going through adversity is an example of keeping that tension. We have a struggle, a situation that by outward accounts would be bad, something negative, something painful. And yet we are told to be thankful in it. Now, one of the things I learned years ago by someone that I had considered wise is the wisdom in that passage doesn't say we have to be thankful for it. because there's going to be time we're not going to feel thankful for adversity, but that we need to be thankful in it. That means grateful to God for what we already have, the blessings that we have, and the fact that we're alive and get to go through the adversity that we are facing. And the right way we got here is talking about how that tension, keeping the right tension in our lives, the right balance and the right perspective, prepares us well to deal with the adversities that come our way. Whereas traditional thought of balance, trying to maintain middle ground all the time, if that's the way you approach it, you're going to be discouraged a great deal, because life and adversity makes it hard to find where the middle is and to hold on to it. And that's not what we need to do. We need to hold on to the principles and the wisdom we found as we go through things. Let's see. Okay, let me get back because I love to hear your comments. Let's see here. Thank you, Sherry, for the kind encouragement support. And yes, Lydia, gratitude is our attributes of our Beatitudes. Indeed, that's a part of the whole principle of the Beatitudes in the Bible and Jesus' public ministry around the Beatitudes. Very good comment. And then Ed Mario makes a comment. You were born to win, but to be a winner, you need to plan to win, prepare to win, expect to win. Indeed, we are designed to win in being who we are. And unfortunately, we have characterized what winning is in a wrong way, and in the same fashion that we have mischaracterized what success is. And people seeking success or being a winner in the wrong fashion are going to find themselves troubled and struggling unnecessarily when and not struggling well with what is necessary. Let's see here. Good comment, Sherry. I hadn't really thought from that perspective that the root of tension in our lives is adversity. Yes, you're right. At the end of the day, it's that adversity that teaches us how to hold those tensions well and prepare to have that tension in place in a healthy fashion. The key is that when we are trying to seek out balance, finding middle ground and staying there all the time, that's not healthy. It doesn't cause us to have hope. It doesn't cause us to have encouragement. And quite often, it will keep us from being able to see what we need to see to get through and overcome that adversity. Welcome, Lee. Glad to have you with us. Appreciate you being back. Lee's been offline for a little while, and so he's back with us and hopefully around to stay. And so let's see, Dr. Vimla, love and light to you all. Have an amazing week ahead. Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Vimla. Appreciate that. So let's kind of bring it back around as we are kind of getting near the end of our time. We started out talking about holding tension and what does it mean to hold tension in our lives. And the example we used is that of a bicycle rim and how that the best function of that bicycle rim is the right tension between the hub, the center, the core, and the outer rim through the spokes. And having that right tension is how that wheel stays aligned, runs right, does what it functions the best it can, is through that tension. And that what we need to focus on is, rather than looking for balance and finding middle ground or half and half all the time, or even, I have to be careful with this, but the term of equality or even equilibrium in our life constantly is not a healthy way to approach life. Our goal is to be balanced through tension in our life. And I think that Sherry summed it up well, that the adversity we go through helps us find that tension, that healthy tension. It is at the center of becoming balanced, becoming, having the right tension in our lives. And so that's where we got started on this. And by having the tension in our lives rather than balance, we are better prepared. We are more agile to respond and react to the challenges in life and things that come along. And it's not just a reaction to the adversities or responses to adversities, but also the blessings. Being able to appreciate the blessings and know how to enjoy them, but even always looking for blessings is unhealthy. And so we have to keep that tension in all regards in our lives, and just really, really welcome those challenges and use those challenges and those adversities to help us find the right tension in our lives. And when we are holding that tension in our lives through growth, through adversity, we will run just like at that rim for the bicycle. When it has the right tension on the spokes, then it will run straight. It will run true. It'll run smoother. If you if you have a bicycle that the tension's not right on the rim, it will not ride smoothly. So again, the lesson from a bicycle rim, who would have ever thought of gaining a lesson from a bicycle rim? So our goal, let's all seek and gain wisdom together. The value of wisdom is much greater than money, gold, jewelry, anything, any possessions. The beauty is that if we seek wisdom, gain wisdom, it will give us more of what we need to be able to gain those things that we need that can be helpful and valuable, but it also helps us to keep it in perspective if we don't gain those things and all. That's why wisdom is much greater than any of the things that we might gain. And that's our goal, seeking and gaining wisdom. And I pray that any and all of you that are part of this today, any that see this recording, will ultimately look to make seeking and gaining wisdom a priority in their life, because of the many benefits that come with seeking and gaining wisdom in our life. That becomes such an important piece. And when we gain that wisdom, life takes on a different perspective. It's easier, by the way, when we have gained wisdom, to be thankful in all things, because we see that much bigger perspective. And hopefully for most, if not all of you, the way you ultimately get wisdom is through learning to see things through God's eyes and have that relationship with our Creator to be able to have the greatest degree of wisdom. Because when we can begin to see things in that fashion, our life looks very different to us. And as a result, we can help others look at life in a very different fashion. In this case, the key there is dealing with that relationship spiritually and having that healthy part of who we are. That's one of the other imbalances that many of us experience, or lack of tension, is not keeping tension between our body, soul, and spirit. We get focused so much on our body so often, a little bit on our soul, and quite often nothing on our spirit. And that is the greatest tension that we need to hold, is to maintain the tension, body, soul, and spirit in our lives. Then we can be healthy. So thank you, everyone. Great comments, conversation, insights. I know I've learned from you guys today. And I pray that something we've talked about has helped you learn and gain wisdom along the way as well. So we'll be back next week at 8 o'clock Monday morning to once again share and seek wisdom together through the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Thanks, everyone. God bless for an amazing week. And we